Hey there, Michael.
Hello, David.
Michael, now this book came out about a year ago, didn't it? Aren't you reviewing it a bit late?
Well, yes, thank you for noticing. It did come out a year ago, so it's not the latest book on the economic trouble we're in, but I think it's the best. You know, the author predicted it all before it happened, and since the book came out, well, he should retitle it. It should be the several trillion-dollar meltdown by now. But of all the accounts I've read about what's gone wrong, I think this is the best one. So, you know, I wish I had read it a year ago.
But I take it you didn't read it for pure enjoyment.
Oh, how true. It is depressing and monotonous, but it does explain why the credit markets collapsed and why the major banks are rotten to the core. And in turn, it explains why this mess is going to take such a long time to unwind.
That is pretty heavy. So who wrote it?
Charles Morris. He's written, I think, about 10 years, 10 books, rather, going back to about 1980. He's a lawyer. He's a former banker. He's been in the market for decades. He's been there, seen that, and gives the situation some perspective. I mean, he explains the liberalism of the 60s, the stagflation of the 70s, you know, the free markets from the Reagan years in the 80s through the 90s, and then explains the world of ultra-cheap money and synthetic investments of the last 10 years or so. Sometimes we need memory. We need perspective. What's the saying? If you don't understand history, you're doomed to repeat it.
So those of us who were already scared by the financial meltdown might feel a little worse now.
Yeah, I think you should feel a little worse. You know, for years, debt grew much faster than income, but the Alan Greenspans of the world said there was nothing to worry about. Morris writes, "No matter what went wrong, the Fed will rescue you by creating enough cheap money to buy you out of your troubles." You know, in 10 years, Americans borrowed $9 trillion against their home equity. This was false prosperity. I remember Don Cox, who's a great writer and a friend of mine. He said after the internet bubble blew up, he said, Wall Street needed something new to sell. What do the suckers have left, they asked. Their homes. You know, this was a major conspiracy. Everyone in the credit system, the home appraisers, the mortgage brokers, the banks, the Wall Street firms that bundled up these mortgages, you know, and the rating agencies who stamped them AAA, it was all rubbish, but they all collected their fees and profited from reckless, predatory lending.
Okay, I think we get the picture now, but how does he say we're going to get out of this mess?
I mean, are you sure you want to know? He says the subprime crisis is only the beginning. You know, all the credit derivative bets that were put on top of that are well into the tens of trillions of dollars. You know, let me read what he says. He says the first priority will be to restore effective oversight on the finance industry. You know, he believes that this crisis has exposed the limits of free market ideology that's, you know, been dominant since the 80s. Let me read again. He says, it's time for a change in economic thinking. The next generation of economists will have to understand financial bubbles rather than ignore them.
So what's the verdict on this one?
Well, it's not a fun book to read, you know, but sometimes medicine that's good for you doesn't taste good. So for this one, I give it 2 thumbs up.
2 thumbs up. All right, Michael, thanks a lot.
You're welcome, David.